The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry expresses regret over some countries' insistence to adopt a wrong approach in dealing with Syria and the crisis. After committing a brutal massacre at Aleppo University, terrorists target al-Qamhana residential area with a missile. Venezuelan Vice President says that President Chavez will overcome the side effects of the surgery. Good afternoon, this is Dania Nizam sitting in for Ala Ibrahim. The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry said in a letter addressed to the chairman of the UN Security Council that Syria expresses regret at some countries' insistence to adopt a wrong approach in terms of seeking to refer the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court, ICC. The ministry's letter came in response to a move taken by a number of countries by which they submitted a joint letter to the Security Council on referring the situation in Syria to the ICC in the framework of their claims of concern about the humanitarian situation in Syria and on efforts to bring human rights violations to a halt. The ministry stressed in its letter that the Syrian government shares those countries' concern over the developments of humanitarian situation in Syria and the human rights violations committed by the armed terrorist groups. It underscored that these developments and violations constitute a large departure from the state of stability, security and freedom of religion and belief which Syria and the Syrians used to enjoy before the crisis. It highlighted that the funding, training and harboring provided to the armed terrorist groups from certain countries, some of them are signatories of the joint letter, are no longer a secret. It pointed out that the move of those countries that are signatories of the joint letter stresses once again their practice of hypocrisy and double standards regarding the crisis in Syria and the international human rights laws in general. The killing machine undertaken by the armed groups and Takfiri gunmen in Syria who film the acts which they commit and circulate the photos as widely as possible via the internet and take pride in this would not have happened had it not been for the weapons made available for this killing machine and for the media and political coverage provided to it by several countries. Again, in Aleppo, inside the terror circle, a terrorist group fired a missile from al-Qamhana to al-Muhafaza residential area, which resulted in a number of martyrs and wounded scores of other people in addition to material damage.
This was how Aleppo's morning was like. While people were asleep in their homes safely, some of them woke up to find that a member of their family was martyred or wounded, or even houses were damaged, whereas some of them didn't wake up at all. It wasn't enough for the terrorists to destroy Aleppo in retaliation of its loyal people. They weren't even satisfied with students' blood. So they did a new horrible attack this Friday morning, as a terrorist group fired a missile from al-Qamhana to al-Muhafaza area, resulted in the falling of a number of martyrs, wounded and material damages.
In Hama, the people of taibet al-Imam and al-Qamhana villages continue to return to their houses after the Syrian Arab Army restored security and stability to the two villages. The citizens who returned referred to the great sacrifices offered by the Syrian Arab Army to eliminate terrorists and make them return safely to their houses. They affirmed their determination to confront terrorists and foil the conspiracy being hatched against their country. The Turkish government arrested 85 figures, among them 15 lawyers from the CHD party. It also issued an arrest warrant against Seljuk Kozagli, chairman of the CHD, and its members. Lawyer Oya Aslan, the two lawyers are visiting Syria to inspect the damages that affected the Syrian people and find common denominators to raise lawsuits against the Turkish government, which is involved in the events in Syria. Syrian parties condemned the Turkish government's arrest of 85 people, among them 15 lawyers of the Contemporary Lawyers Association, describing the act as immoral. The Syrian Democratic National Bloc Party, the National Youth Party for Justice and Development, and the Popular Front for Liberation and Change denounced in a statement the Turkish government's move, saying it was a desperate attempt to prevent the opposition rising movement against policies of the Turkish Justice and Development Party from prosecuting Erdogan's government on their involvement in crimes inside Syria. Turkish lawyer Seljuk Kozakli, who's currently visiting Syria in solidarity with the Syrian people, affirmed that Contemporary Lawyers Association, CHD, will continue to work with all trade and vocational unions in Turkey to disclose Erdogan's government's immoral practices and crimes against the Syrian people.
We will collect information about the losses inflicted upon the Syrian people because of Erdogan's immoral practices, especially the robbery and the trading of the territories to attack the Syrian people and their properties. We will also file lawsuits against Erdogan and the Justice and Development Party because of hosting these terrorists. The Turkish people, like the Syrians, were greatly harmed by Erdogan's policies. We are here to clarify to the Turkish people that the reality of the events in Syria are not like this, because our people will not accept the crimes perpetrated by their government against the Syrian people. We have seen sabotage and plunder acts by the Erdogan government, and it is a partner in committing these crimes.
The head of the National Security and Foreign Affairs Committee at the Iranian Parliament, Alauddin Bajordi, stressed that Syria has a strong army composed of the steadfast Syrian people, which does not allow any interference in its internal affairs. He clarified that the claims of the terrorist groups in Syria about an Iranian interference in the internal issues are baseless, and they are due to the failure of these groups that are supported by the Qatari and the Saudi regimes. Bajordi said that despite the continuance of the Syrian crisis and the ongoing Qatari and Saudi financial support to terrorists, the attempts to change the political government in Syria has failed. Bajordi responded to the claims of the leaders of these terrorist groups concerning the Russian-Iranian support to Syria, saying that his country will stand by Moscow and Beijing, and they will support Syria because it is the front force facing the Zionist entity. The Russian President's special envoy to the Middle East and Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov stressed that the Russian principled stance on the crisis in Syria is firm in terms of finding a solution that is based on dialogue and the principles agreed on in Geneva, in the Geneva Declaration. Bogdanov's stress came during a meeting with a delegation of the People's Assembly chaired by head of the Press Printing and Publishing Committee, Faiz Assair, in Moscow. He said Russia is committed to its principled and firm stance that is based on solving the crisis in Syria through comprehensive dialogue among all the parties involved in it and on the basis of the principles agreed on in the Geneva Declaration. He highlighted the Russian efforts seeking to unify the international stances around finding a solution to the crisis in Syria by peaceful means. For his part, Assair highlighted the constructive role played by Russia regarding the situation in Syria, stressing that what is going on in Syria is not a sectarian or civil war, but rather a war waged against it through the misleading media and the continuous flow of money. Official Algerian sources affirm that the perpetrators of the terrorist attack against Ain Amina's oil base came from Libya.
Algeria announced the end of the special operation carried out by the Algerian army to release the hostages in the oil plant. The Algerian Minister of Interior affirmed that the group which attacked the oil base came from Libya and it prepared the terrorist attacks there. The security forces also said that some of the members of the terrorist group are still inside the base and more than 60 hostages are still detained inside. The terrorist attack drew international condemnation, especially from France and Britain, which warned against the terrorist attacks, ignoring the important fact that they were the main sources behind the terrorism in the region, especially after destroying the Libyan state and changing it into conflicting emirates and stores for weapons and Takfiri terrorists to be distributed to the nearby states to achieve the Western Chaos Project in the Arab states. Earlier, the Tunisian president also admitted that Libya and Tunis have become a passage for sending weapons to the extremists.
Venezuelan Vice President Nicolas Maduro announced that there is a good chance that President Hugo Chavez will overcome the repercussions of the medical operation, in addition to the respiratory problems. In a television interview, Maduro said that President Chavez is responding slightly and his health is advancing, adding that he will be fine in the coming weeks. In a related context, Maduro accused the United States of America of being behind the manipulations regarding the health of President Hugo Chavez after his surgery in Cuba a few weeks ago, saying that the Venezuelan people will not be affected by the American schemes toward the country. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching us. For more information about Syria and the region, and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. It's over to our economic news with Vani. After the break, God bless you and God bless Syria.